Saints-Panthers preview. Can the New Orleans Saints start hot against an NFC South rival in the season opener in the Superdome? Ladies and gentlemen, are you excited? I am. It feels like Christmas morning. It feels like best time of the year. All the hope is there. You can win every single bet. You're going to win your fantasy league. Your team is going to make a run. It's all possible right now. Enjoy this time. Now, today we're going to be talking about the New Orleans Saints and the Carolina Panthers. Week 1 in the Superdome. The backdrop for the video, OTB, off the bench. Saints, Jacob Hester, T-Bob Abear, T-Bob not in the shot. I'm assuming he will join us shortly. Maybe not. Maybe it's all Jacob. No, it looks like it's all Jacob Hester. Okay, let's rock and roll. I'll be reacting like only I can do.
Let's play the Panthers coming up this weekend inside the Caesars Superdome. And Carolina was very bad a year ago. They earned
ass on a stick is what Carolina was. Horrible. Carolina was beyond bad. And a lot of people say, well, Bryce Young will be better this year. Well, I hope so, because if he's not, he'll be out of the league. Bryce Young had the 3rd worst rookie season ever quantified. Who was the 2 worst, you ask? David Carr and Josh Rosen had the 2 rookie seasons worse than Bryce Young. That's how bad it was. Think about some of the worst rookie quarterbacks you've ever seen, the Jamarcus Russells of the world, whoever. Bryce Young was worse. He is on that trajectory. Last year, I said I think Bryce Young will go down as the biggest bust in NFL history when you factor in what Carolina traded, what they traded to get him, and the fact that they took him over C.J. Stroud. I mean, not only did they trade, you could say they traded Caleb Williams for him, but they also said, C.J. Stroud, no thanks. So when you factor all that in, I think Bryce Young could be up there. So he's got a long way to go. If he gets a little bit better, he's still really bad. So the idea that he may progress, it still might not be good enough.
Earned the number 1 pick. Now, they didn't have the number 1 pick because they traded it to the Bears, as we all know, but they were that bad. They earned the number 1 pick. The Saints are a 4.5-point favorite right now. And here is Dennis Allen, excited for game week here coming up in a couple days.
Quick note on the number. Saints opened 6, so they opened -6. They got bet down. 6 is a lot in a divisional game. I think a lot of people just bet divisional dogs just out of principle. But 6 was seemingly too much. Saints got bet down to 3.5. 3.5 was seemingly too short. They got bet back up to 4.5. Now we're sitting here. Now I'm filming this before the weekend, so the limits, and now we're kind of getting into a gambling thing, but the limits will open up. What that means is the limits will get higher as more money comes in, heavier players come in, and then you can see the numbers move a little bit. Now, this is different in week 1 because these numbers have been out for months, but just be careful if you're watching like line moves early in the week. Make sure give it a little bit of time.
All right, game week. So excited to be here working. Thought we had good practice today, and we're excited about the opportunity to start off with a division opponent. Look, they got a lot of new faces from a personnel standpoint. Got some new faces in terms of coaching staff standpoint. There'll be a lot of adjusting that'll need to be done as the game moves along, but we're certainly excited about having an opportunity to start out, open up division opponent in our building, and I think our guys will be ready to play.
Okay, so I made this argument previously, but I'll do it again just in case you didn't see that video. The divisional opponent, like, familiarity thing can be kind of like a trope that isn't always true. And this situation is one where it's not true. The Panthers have 0 familiarity with the Saints offense. Absolutely 0. They've never seen Klint Kubiak calling plays or a Klint Kubiak specific offense or any of that stuff. They do not know how this will look. You add on to that, yes, it's the same defensive coordinator, but it's a different green dot player. So last year, the Panthers' green dot player, which is the defensive player who has the headset in their helmet, who's communicating with the defensive coordinator, getting the plays to then tell the defense, that was Frankie Louvu, however you say his name. Last year, he's gone, so they have a new green dot player, same defensive coordinator, but the familiarity is not there. It's non-existent with this offense. Now, you may say, well, that means the Saints have no familiarity with the with the Panthers, right? Because they have a new offense. They have Dave Canales coming in from the Bucs. Not true. right? Because the Saints do have familiarity because they played that team twice last year. They have plenty of familiarity with how Canales will operate this offense. So it's not always just divisional opponents have tons of familiarity with each other. That's not the case. The Panthers they do have familiarity with the Saints defense. Canales saw it obviously when he was in Tampa. Some of the Panthers players have seen the Saints, since they're in the division. So there are wrinkles to that. There are wrinkles to the idea of how familiar a divisional opponent is with each other. So just remember that as well whenever you think about that. The Saints have way more continuity defensively than the Panthers, and I would give that advantage to them too with familiarity, with the whole Canales thing, versus the Panthers having zero familiarity with what's going to happen with Klint Kubiak.
Now, for me, when you're talking Carolina Panthers, it's going to be, where is quarterback Bryce Young in year number 2? He was not good a year ago, and then, of course, it's always heightened whenever C.J. Stroud, who was picked number 2, goes out there and has a Pro Bowl-type season. And people are excited about C.J. Stroud in Houston. He's got all these receivers. He's got 3 guys to throw it to. He's got a running back in Mixon, and that's an exciting team. And Bryce Young right now, he's got the pressure of trying to not be a bust and being a number 1 overall pick. Not only when you don't work out, but when the number 2 pick's the same position and the team traded up to take you, there's an added expectation. There's an added pressure. And where he's at is obviously going to be pivotal to the success of the Carolina Panthers. And
yeah, Bryce Young, obviously, we can say all we want about who's familiar with who. We can say all we want about divisional opponent. We can say all we want about the offensive line, Trevor Penning, whatever, but it's really going to come down to, how good can Bryce Young be? If Bryce Young is not good, this is a quarterback-driven league. And again, he isn't even close to not good. He's so far, he has to actually get better to be labeled not good. Right now, he's labeled, I would say, not playable. So can Canales kind of figure things out enough to make Bryce Young relatively playable? Not a great place to try and do that is the Superdome in week 1, where the Saints are as healthy as they're going to be. The fans are as ramped up as they'll be. They'll be as rocking as any game besides Denver. It'll probably be on par with Denver because it's the first game of the year. So this is not an environment where you want to go in there and try and figure things out. And by figure things out, with all these moving pieces. The green dot on defense, like I'm talking about, he's going to have to hit the first time he's going to be communicating plays from the defensive coordinator to his defense is going to be in an environment where he's not going to be able to be comfortable, on the road and all that. Obviously, it won't be as loud when he's on defense, but still, you're not at home. It's not the best setting for you to figure those things out, specifically for the offense. Think about Bryce Young. He's got all these new pieces. Was it 3 new offensive linemen for Carolina? He's got a new play caller. He's learning a new system. He's got new wide receivers. He's going to have to – there's a lot of growing pains that come with that much turnover in key positions. And the worst place possible for Bryce Young to get all that figured out right off the rip is in front of 70,000 Bloody Mary-infused fans.
You look at the weapons and you spend a first-round pick on Xavier Leggett. You have Adam Thielen coming back, and you trade for Johnson at the receiver position from Pittsburgh. You had Jonathan Mingo, who was a second-round pick just a year ago. Now, remember, they cut Terrace Marshall. He's no longer on this team, and so they feel good about where they're at receiver. Chuba Hubbard's going to be the running back, but it's all going to come down to Bryce Young in year number 2. Here is Dennis Allen on Bryce Young.
He only played 1 series in the preseason, and it was a pretty effective series. They were able to move the ball down the field. They scored a touchdown. They got him out of the pocket a few times, got him on the move some. Looked like he was making some checks at the line of scrimmage. Looked like he was comfortable in the things that they're asking him to do. I've always felt like this is a guy that's poised in the pocket. I've always felt like this is a guy that understands how to navigate the pocket and move in the pocket. And so, look, I think our ability to affect him in a lot of different ways, whether it be rush, coverage, how we rush him, rush integrity, maybe some different looks, I think that's going to be important. As with any quarterback, it starts with that player. And the more you're able to affect him, the more success you're going to be able to have.
All right, this is a situation in where the Saints have to go out and win this game.
Yeah.
All right. You got to
100%. I mean, it all lines up for the Saints. I mean, they're at home, they're healthy, all the advantages we talked about with the turnover and the unknown. There's no game tape on this. You also have the familiarity roster-wise. Well, we just talked about Bryce Young with new receivers, new linemen, and all that. Derek Carr's got pretty much the same group. And we've heard all off season long how important it was for this team to come together as people. Just like spend time with each other. Become, I don't want to say become friends, but to have some kind of camaraderie that we didn't see last year. Last year we saw Carr arguing with Olave and arguing with McCoy and some miscommunication, and a toxic locker room. And they've made an effort, it sounds like at least, to fix that. And not only from the coaching staff, but also, we heard all training camp how much energy Janoko and Kubiak were bringing to practices, and we heard about how the positive vibes, and we heard about Demario Davis and Derek Carr, hosting events together. And Carr even said in interviews where he told his wife, like, look, I'm not going to be available, because Carr is giving his all to try and be more of a teammate, more of a friend, I guess, to these guys. So that's a huge bonus for the Saints. And the Saints have the better roster. They have the advantage in the key areas. So just like, their secondary is one of the best secondaries in the NFL. This isn't a great wide receiver room in Carolina. You would think Carolina's going to be down. You would think Carolina's going to be asked to throw the football. And I think the secondary probably loves the idea of Bryce Young throwing into them. I mean, this is a secondary with Tyrann Mathieu and Marshawn Lattimore and, all these guys who ball hawkers, and they can make plays. So if you told me that Bryce Young's going to drop back 30 times and throw into this defense, and we're going to have opportunities for Chase Young and the guys on the defensive front to get after the quarterback, pin their ears back, and go, I love that for us. Flip side, not a great Carolina defense. This defense was 25th last year in DVOA. So even though the Saints offensive line might not be great, we're not up against a front that should cause us a ton of trouble. And then as far as defensive backs and linebackers, again, I like the chances of Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave to get what they want. I like the idea of Alvin Kamara getting what he wants. And I think the Saints have a much better avenue, a much more linear path to victory than the Panthers. The Panthers they're going to have to rely on turnovers. They're going to have to rely on special teams. They're going to have to rely on getting ahead early, dictating the pace, mucking this game up. And that's a lot that has to happen for them to win the game. All the Saints have to do is be efficient. All the Saints have to do is protect the football, which Carr did great last year. They have to let Bryce Young make mistakes, which he is more than capable of doing, and let the defense be who it is. Let this defense be a top 10 defense. If all that happens, I don't see a reason why we can't win this game comfortably. A wrinkle to this is this whole the scripted assets or the scripted kind of first play or first possession. So Dennis Allen mentioned that Bryce Young had a really good possession in the preseason. We've talked about it a million times. Bad quarterbacks tend to do really well in the first possession of games because it's scripted. I remember Mitchell Trubisky when he was at Chicago. Mitchell Trubisky was like the greatest first possession quarterback ever. They were like 90% on the first possession of the games because it's scripted. There is no thinking. There is no checking. There is no audibles. There is no hot routes. There is no moving the line around. You are just running the 15 plays that you ran in practice. It's the easiest thing possible. So it's not surprising to me that Bryce Young was really good in the preseason in that possession because it's the most scripted possible. It's just him running the 15 plays in order. It's just a choreographed possession. More than likely, the Panthers will have success on the first possession of this game. No reason to panic because they've had 4 months to script it out. The question is, what will it look like on the second possession, the third possession, the fourth possession once Bryce Young has to actually lean into the game? So I will not be surprised at all if Carolina gets the ball, marches down, and scores. I'd be very surprised if they kept that up and scored 21, 24, 28 points in this game. I had a score prediction of 23-17, and I'm going to stick with it. I think the Saints win 23-17. I think the Panthers get some early success off of those scripted, choreographed drives, and then the game gets away from them. I think the Saints find success on the ground. I think the Saints bleed the clock out, run the football at will, and that's kind of how I see this one going. I think the defense steps up, really causes a lot of problems for Bryce Young. I think Chase Young has a big game. Chase Young and the defensive line shows that they're going to be a huge asset for the Saints this year, and that's how I see this playing.
A new coaching staff in Carolina. You've got a second-year quarterback that did not look good in year number one. He looked overmatched most of the time. He only played one series in the preseason, like you just heard there from Dennis Allen. They've got okay weapons, but their weapons are either older or they're young players, right? They don't have that sure go-to weapon maybe that really scares you or makes you nervous. Now, they've added a couple of different pieces on defense, and defense wasn't the issue for Carolina. The defense was not bad in Carolina. It's all
defense was ass.
Offensive.
But they did lose key defensive players. They're not returning. I mean, we talked about the green dot earlier, but the Brian Burns of the world, and they're not there anymore.
And so you bring in a new coach that led the Buccaneers offense, and you're hoping for improvement there. But if you're the New Orleans Saints and you don't go win this game,
yeah,
my God, what does the rest of the season look like?
It's a disaster. I mean, if the Saints don't win this game, you're talking about like legit final destination, day after tomorrow, Independence Day type, catastrophe. I mean, this is as bad as it gets. If the Saints lose this game, the fans will be in a riotous situation. It'll be one of those things where the Superdome, it would not be a fun environment at all. I don't know, because the schedule at the beginning of the season is really tough. Like we talked about it before, where if you beat Carolina, lose to Dallas, lose to Philly, lose to Kansas City, even lose on the road to Atlanta, you're still in a pretty decent position. There's still a lot in front of you. You have to win this game, though, because if you lose this game, then you're staring 0-6. You're staring 0-6 down pretty quick. And then you have to you drop it one of the few games you're favored in. I think we're favored in 7 games this season. So you lose one of those, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, you're only now favored 5 more times, because more than likely if you lose to Carolina, some of those are going to flip. You probably won't be favored. I think we're favored on the road against Tampa. You certainly won't be favored in that game if you lose to Carolina. So some of those would flip. So then all of a sudden it's like you're only expected to win 4-ish, 5-ish games. Then your ceiling now is 6 wins. You're fighting for 6-7 wins. And then what does the fan base do if you're 0-6? Like, that's when you legit have conversations then about, like, is Allen going to get fired midseason? We did a whole video talking about that. I think it's really possible if we are looking at an 0-8, 0-10, 0-6 still early, because, like I said, the schedule's so tough. But anything can happen. It is the NFL, but it is really difficult for me to see a spot where the Saints lose this game. It would be, you talk about how the wool pulled over your eyes. All the positivity we saw in the offseason, all the good stuff we saw in the preseason, all the good stuff we saw in training camp, all the good things we've heard in interviews, everything would be unraveled in 3 hours if we found a way to lose this game at home.
You're at home playing against a team that earned the number 1 pick in last year's draft, a new coaching staff, and you've got basically everything returning. Now, I'm not saying all returning production is good production, but you have the ability, right, to have way better chemistry. Because if you don't, then that's even more troublesome for the Saints, right? You bring back...
Yeah, the chemistry should be pretty high.
Your defense. In large part, now, good, bad, or indifferent, you didn't really add a lot on offense. You kind of bring back the same guys. Now you have a new system and a new coordinator, but the personnel is going to be the same. Right. If you go out and you let Bryce Young beat you at home in the home opener, what does the rest of the season look like?
It would be an abject failure. I mean, at that point, you would have to beat Philly or Dallas or Kansas City, I guess, to even come close to, like, straightening out the season if you lose to Carolina. And then, then it's like, what the hell is even going on if you lose to Carolina but then turn around and beat Philly or Dallas? But, yeah, it's you look at like a 1 + 1 = 2 kind of thing, is that we keep saying, okay, the Saints have a top 10 defense, maybe top 5 defense. If you lose to Carolina at home in the opener, no, you don't. All right, we keep saying, like, oh, well, the system is sweet, the system is good, Kubiak is better than Carmichael, whatever. If you lose in the opener to Carolina, no, you don't. Like, all of a sudden the system is not sweet. All of a sudden we got a lot of question marks. And it's not just you lose this game, it's not just oh, well, maybe Derek Carr isn't it. Oh, well, maybe Dennis Allen isn't it. You lose this game, you start looking around at everything. I know it's one game, but everything is set up to where you almost can't lose. Everything is set up to where it's perfect. It is the perfect time to play the Panthers. Could not ask for a better time to play the Panthers, but then it's also the worst time to play the Saints. The worst time to play the Saints is week 1. You haven't seen anything. You have not seen a single. You've seen one possession basically of this offense. That's it. How do you prep for that? How do you get all that ready? The fact that we're playing at home, like all those things line up perfectly for us. Every single domino lines up for us to win this game. So it's hard to see every single domino line up to win this game, and then you drop it. It would be shocking. Because
I don't have high hopes for Carolina.
Hell no.
Right, so it's in a situation where I think Carolina's going to go surprise a lot of us and be a 9-win football team. 4 or 5 wins is probably what they're looking at. And if they shock us, look, we'll raise our hand. We'll tell you we were wrong. But the Saints have to win this game. They have to go out there and assert their dominance on defense and make enough plays on offense, because every beat writer for the Saints has been telling us, oh, this is just it's a fraction of the playbook. Okay, there's no more fractions.
Yeah,
right?
it's
all
on
the whole sum.
Yeah,
here in this game, it's supposed to be an explosive offense with a lot of moving parts in a good way, and supposed to get the ball in the playmaker's hands with a lot of different looks and shifts and movements and motions and all. Okay, that's great. But now it's time. Now it's time to show us what everybody has been talking about. And again, a lot of new in Carolina this year, where you should be a lot more stable than they are currently right now, even with the new offensive coordinator, because there's so much that you have as far as personnel and certainly defensive staff that is coming back. But here is Dennis Allen on what it's going to look like with Carolina's new coach and on the offensive side.
We played against his scheme and his system last year in Tampa Bay, and
exactly what I said to start the video.
And you see a lot of carryover into what they're doing. He's a guy that's been committed to being able to run the football. Obviously, they bulked up their offensive line, a couple of additions inside, and they're a big, physical offensive line. I thought they ran the ball well at times during the preseason, so I think that's certainly something that they want to be able to do. I think some of the play action pass, some of the movement passing game with the quarterbacks, obviously part of what they do. So I see a team that's well coached. I thought, look, they came in here against us early in the season last year and beat us pretty good. I thought they out-executed us, talking about their offense, Tampa's offense versus our defense. And so I know they're a well-coached group, and I know we're going to have our hands full.
I know Dennis is a lot of this is just whatever. I mean, you're not going to, he's not going to come out there and say like, Bryce Young sucks, so I'm not worried about it. But Canales had a lot of different weapons last year. Like, he had some pretty talented players. I mean, even just Mike Evans alone. Mike Evans would be the best player on Carolina's team by far. Rashad White would probably be the best player on Carolina's team by far. So I think Tampa's. I wouldn't use Tampa as an example of like a cutting edge, really innovative, fun to watch offense. So Canales is it's gonna be pretty vanilla. It's gonna be pretty basic, especially in the run game. It's gonna be pretty much head down, run forward, see what happens. And Dennis Allen I have been touting him as the best defensive coordinator in the NFL. He's certainly in that top 5 conversation. So if he can't figure out how to stop this, if he can't figure out how to stop a team that roster-wise is really bad and system-wise very well, that would be shocking to me.
Taylor, how's your feel in this game? New Orleans, Carolina in the Superdome. Again, if you lose this one, I just don't know what your expectation is going to be for the rest of the season. I'm talking to every listener out there. Mine's going to be in the dumpster. It's already not that far from that right now, just because I just don't feel great about where they're at offensively. Again, I would love to be proven wrong. I would love to see in game number 1 the use of Taysom Hill, and if AK's back on the field, and what Derek Carr can give you with a receiver room that just right now looks really, really thin. So I don't have the highest of expectations, but if they go out and they lose to Carolina, they're at an all-time low.
Yes.
I actually talked about this exact thing yesterday when I was filling in for you guys. This is a must-win game. We had Nick on. He said the same thing. It's weird to say in week 1. Jake, you look at their schedule. I just pulled it up for the first 6 weeks. If you don't beat Carolina, you go on the road against Dallas. That's going to be tough. You're probably not winning that game. You come home against Philadelphia. You get bad Philly, good Philly.
Yeah.
At Atlanta, week 4. At Kansas City, week 5.
Yeah, boy.
And then you come back home and you play a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that you struggled against last year.
Yeah.
Well, and not only that, but like you're in a situation where if you lose to Carolina, if you can lose to Carolina, you can lose to anybody. So all of a sudden, all these coin flip games, you're on the wrong side of. All these coin flip games, you're all of a sudden the dog. All of a sudden, the games where it's like, okay, we'll split against the Bucks, we'll split against the Falcons. If you lose to Carolina, you ain't splitting against nothing. Okay, so yeah, it's must win, and it's not only must win, but we got to win. I think we got to win and prove it. If Derek Carr has 47 yards passing at halftime and it's 3-0, I'm going to be very concerned. We have to see this team work. We have to all these things that we have theorized over the last 4 months, we have to see them work. I've sat up here and said this offense is going to be more innovative, more creative, more explosive. If it's 47 yards passing and 3-0 at halftime, then what's going on here? I've sat up here and said this is a top 10, top 5 defense. If Bryce Young carves us up, what's going on here? I've said that Chase Young is going to be better. The defensive line is going to be better. If we're getting moved around and we can't stop the run and we can't get after Bryce Young, what's going on? This is a backs against the wall, prove it, line in the sand type game. And if we were opening the season against Dallas, then it's like, okay, I'm not really expecting us to shut Dallas out. I'm not expecting us to, keep Micah Parsons at bay. I'm not expecting. There's a little more wiggle room. There's no wiggle room in this game. There's no wiggle room because we're supposed to dominate every single one of these areas of the game. Now, I understand it's the NFL, any given Sunday, whatever, but this team is as prepped as they can possibly be. This team is as healthy as they can possibly be. This is as good of a spot as they'll possibly get. This is as easy of an opponent as they'll possibly get. This is arguably the easiest game on their schedule. Even if you think Denver is worse than Carolina, just the Sean Payton factor makes it less advantageous than this game. Even if you think the Raiders are worse or whoever, the Giants or the Commanders, like the Commanders have, I trust, right now, I trust the Commanders roster way more than I trust the Panthers roster, just talent-wise. I would take the Commanders roster in a heartbeat over the Panthers roster. You got a bottom 3 roster, total unknowns. I mean, it's just, it's almost like too good to be true. It's almost too lined up. And I do have to sometimes kind of check myself because if I was just unbiased looking at this from afar, I would be like, this is a home run. This is a home run spot for the Saints. Easy. Great spot, great situation. I wouldn't even worry about it. But because I'm so tied to talking about all these things and making all these proclamations and the line in the sand, it does make me nervous. But I hear the sirens. It's unbelievable. But I do have faith. Am I nervous? Yeah, sure. But I do have faith in everything we've said is true. And I think it will hold true come Sunday. And I think the Saints will win. I think they'll look good. I think it'll be convincing. And I think we'll all be able to breathe easy at 3 o'clock on Sunday.
I mean, if you have to win this week 1 game. Now, it lightens up for you after that. You got Denver, you got the Chargers, you got the Panthers again.
Whoa.
I know. But you're in LA, in that ruckus LA crowd.
That doesn't really matter.
Yeah, the Chargers have almost a negative home field advantage.
But it lightens up after that. You get the Browns. What are they going to be? The Rams later in the year, the Giants. But that first 6-7 weeks of the season, this is about as must-win as a season opener could be.
Yeah. No, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think when you look at who you are, what you have coming up, and who your opponent is, I'm agreeing. It's going to be like that Dallas game on the road. That's going to be tough because
that is advantageous, though, and we'll obviously cover that game way more. But that's when you want to get Dallas. You want to get Dallas right now. You want to get Dallas when they've had a horrible offseason, when there's all this controversy, when there's moving pieces, when You're relying on Ezekiel Elliott and Dalvin Cook. Like, you don't want to get them later on. So they're another situation where it matters. Like, moving pieces and all of that and what happens in the offseason is the most impactful in the first 3 weeks of the season, I would say. After that, it probably kind of figures itself out. After that, teams are relatively, they've shaken the rust off, or however you want to phrase it. But in that first couple of weeks, you're absolutely going to see some miscommunication, some penalties that will happen later in the year, some passes that go awry. So getting Dallas in that window, I think, is pretty good too.
They have offense.
Like Philly's the same. Like Philly, they have a new defensive coordinator in Vic Fangio. Vic Fangio's defenses are really, really difficult they're really advanced, really complex. So you want to get them early because it's the most non-familiar the defense is going to be with the scheme. So, certain teams is better to play. It's always better. It's pros and cons, but a lot of people think it's better to play rookie quarterbacks early because they're so caught up in just how an NFL game even feels, how a game day feels, how it looks. It's their first time driving to the stadium on a game day. It's their first time going through the commercial breaks and all that stuff. Now, I don't know if the unknown is as valuable as having game tape on them. I think there's a little bit of I could see both sides of that one, but the schedule, like, you do have to factor that kind of stuff in early in the schedule.
Of weapons that can challenge your good defense. And then defensively, what does Dallas do really well? They get after the quarterback and they turn you over.
Yeah.
What are you terrified of right now as a Saints fan? Blocking a good pass rusher and Derek Carr protecting the football and making good decisions.
I'm not worried about the second part. Carr was good holding on to the football last year. And also, it's not our tackle versus Micah Parsons. It's our scheme versus Micah Parsons. Can Kubiak scheme around it? Can we kind of neutralize that? It's not how it was 10 years ago where, well, we're just going to drop back and pass, and if our tackle can't block, he can't block. Like now, you can do screens, you can do different zone runs, you can kind of take that player out. We've seen it with Aaron Donald over the last couple of years. Aaron Donald, there's a lot of times where they basically won't block him. They'll allow Aaron Donald to be free, but they're purposefully either calling the plays away from him or screening around him to where, one, they don't have to worry about blocking him, which is impossible at times, or was impossible at times. And it allows them to kind of, so that's how schemes can neutralize, whereas back in the day, it would just be man on man. It would just be like, well, we're either going to block him or not. It is going to be a one person's job. Now it's a little more advanced than that.
It's not a great matchup for you. And he listed a couple of the other ones. Like, yeah, those games, like, those are going to be games that you're probably going to be a dog in. All of them, if not most of them. And so that's why week number one, as a favorite against a bad Carolina football team, feels like it is must win right now. And also, it does lighten up for you outside the Chargers game. I don't know what Taylor was talking about there. But
but it doesn't lighten up for you if you lose to Carolina. Because then it's like, okay, you play the Giants, okay, you play the Commanders, okay, you play the Raiders, okay, you play the Broncos. But we're only saying that because we think we're better than all those teams. We think we're better than Carolina. If you lose to Carolina, all of a sudden it's like, well, damn, those easy games don't look very easy at all. Those easy games look less easy than Carolina, and we dropped that one.
You don't want to start behind the eight ball.
Hell no.
That's the last thing that you want to do, because in the NFL, it starts rolling downhill, and you think that, we'll get to the point where we're going to have winnable games, but everything's already, down in the dumps, and you feel like you can't overcome that.
Especially a team coming off of last year. Especially a team that heard it all season last year. Especially a team that had to answer these questions for 17 weeks last year. They think that this is done. They think the nightmare is over. So if immediately they're thrown right back into that, you talk about down in the dumps times infinity.
It's tough to kind of fight your way back in the National Football League. And so, week number one, Carolina, it's a game that you should win. It's a game that you need to win. It's almost a game that you must win. And we'll see if the Saints can get that done here coming up this weekend inside the Caesars Superdome.
Wow.
Yeah, I think the Saints win this game 23-17. Again, I'm nervous, no doubt about it, but you got to look at everything that points to the Saints. We have the advantage in every single way. There's not a single aspect of this game where the Panthers have the advantage. I know a lot of people are high on Carolina. I think they expect Bryce Young to be better, but they're not factoring in just how bad he was. So I can't wait. I can't wait. I really can't. It's going to be, unbelievable. I'm just happy football's here. Happy the season's here. We've been talking about this for months, weeks, every single day. We've been talking about this season coming up. What's it going to look like? What can we expect? And now we're going to actually see all of that come to fruition. So exciting times. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.